Hello, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning. We are here in the Soroka Salon Going Virtual for the first time. We are going to have a series speaking about the promise of the Negev with today's first session about the history, the early days. And to present our distinguished guest today, I'm inviting Rachel Heisler, Executive Director of Soroka, of American Friends of Soroka Medical Center. Rachel?
Well, thank you very much, Pazit. Pazit is our outstanding Director of Development who, like the entire Soroka family, she lives and breathes to tell the story of Soroka Medical Center. If this is your first time attending a Soroka event, we warmly welcome you into the Soroka family. And on behalf of American Friends of Soroka Medical Center's Board of Directors, I welcome each and every one of you into our salon today. Soroka is one of the largest and most important institutions in Israel. We are committed to uplifting the population through education, research, collaboration, and endless innovation. All of this is thanks to the unique pioneering spirit of the Negev and the special heart and compassion of our medical team, sensitive and supportive for our unique population. A few facts. Soroka is ranked the best hospital by the Israeli Health Department. It is the only major medical center in the Negev region, the entire lower 60% of Israel's landmass, with 1.2 million residents. Soroka is home to a world-class genetics research center, the Francis and Nathan Kirsch Emergency Department and Trauma Center, the busiest in Israel, and highly strategic given the newly relocated IDF training bases in the region and Soroka's close proximity to Gaza. The newest comprehensive cancer center in Israel, the Legacy Heritage Oncology Center and Dr. Larry Norton Institute, also the first inpatient rehabilitation center in the Negev. And we also have one of Israel's busiest labor and delivery centers, where nearly 20,000 babies are born each year at our Saban Birth and Maternity Center. And of those babies, 50% are of Arab parents, representing the diversity of Israel's Negev region. So you see, Soroka Medical Center is a true living symbol of peaceful coexistence. While we are known as the oasis of the Negev, we consider Soroka to be the actual bedrock of the Negev, the strong and essential base upon which all other endeavors, such as society, industry, and education, rely. This series today launching was designed to illuminate the interesting modern history of the region, as it is by understanding history that we can truly appreciate where we are today and appreciate how Soroka is essential to the growth and development of the Negev, and how it is such a vital factor in the future strategic development of the entire region. And we could have no better guide on this journey than Professor Michael Bar-Zohar. A true Renaissance man, Professor Bar-Zohar is an award-winning author, historian, researcher, and politician. He was born in Bulgaria, grew up in Israel, studied in Jerusalem and France, and fought in 4 Israeli wars, and spent 9 years beside David Ben-Gurion, Israel's founder and first prime minister, as his confidant and biographer. Professor Bar-Zohar has written more than 40 books and screenplays, and has won so many awards, including the French Academy Award, the Ben-Gurion Award, and he was knighted by the President of France. We are so honored to consider him a dear friend and an advocate for Soroka. Joining Professor Bar-Zohar today is a very special guest, Ambassador Haim Divon. Ambassador Divon is one of Israel's most respected diplomats, and his personal family history is intertwined in a very unique way with the ascent of the Negev. His career spanned 41 years with Israeli Foreign Service. Among his overseas postings, he has served as head of the Israeli mission to Sri Lanka, ambassador to Ethiopia, ambassador to Canada, and ambassador to the Netherlands. Amongst his postings are also 2 stints as director of Mashav, Israel's Agency for International Development Cooperation and as coordinator of Ethiopian affairs, where he coordinated the interministerial committee which planned Operation Solomon. So it is our honor and privilege to have these distinguished leaders of Israel, these people who were in the room when history was made, when the history of the Negev unfolded. To have them join Soroka today is our honor. We are in for a treat. And now I'd like to introduce you to Deborah Cherky. Deborah is a board member of American Friends of Soroka Medical Center. She was raised in the Negev, and today she is the leader of the Soroka Salon program. Deborah.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm so excited to launch Soroka Salon with this wonderful webinar series exploring the different aspects of the Negev. Professor Michael Bar-Zohar is a fountain of knowledge on that subject and the perfect man for the job. I can't wait to learn from him and his guest, Ambassador Divon, with us today. Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you enjoy. Pazit, back to you.
Thank you very much. It's so good to be and work together with such a passionate and dedicated and a kind, generous group of people. We're gonna start with Professor Michael Bar-Zohar, take us through history of the Negev, and then Ambassador Haim Divon will share with us his personal family story of the Negev, including Soroka and the formation of Soroka. And then we're gonna open to question and answers. I have here about 10 questions that people registered and put in the registration form, but you're also welcome to put your question in the Q&A little icon, and we will do our best to address all of the questions. If we don't address, we can follow up with emails, okay? So thank you very much, and Professor Bar-Zohar, the stage is yours. Yes, unmute please, Professor Bar-Zohar.
Right. Welcome, everybody. Hello. Do you hear me? Yes. Do you hear me? Yes, you do. Okay. Can I have the first picture?
Yes.
Please. Yes. You see, this picture shows us the city, town of Beersheba at the beginning of the history of the state of Israel. That's kind of a neglected, lost town in the south of Palestine, and it was conquered during the Independence War. The Negev, which was a part of Israel, which is a part of Israel, is about 62% of the entire territory of Israel. And David Ben-Gurion, with whom I spent 9 years of my life, David Ben-Gurion saw the development of the Negev, which was just a desert, as one of the major goals of the state of Israel. Now, this Negev almost was not ours, because shortly before the creation of Israel, the American State Department officials, they were very, very upset about the creation of a Jewish state. So they thought that they might, let's say, soften the Arab hostility to Israel by taking away the Negev from the promised state of Israel and giving it to the Arabs. At the last moment, though, Dr. Chaim Weizmann, the former head of the Zionist organization, met with President Truman and received a promise that the Negev is going to be ours. And then when the Independence War was going to end, we suddenly saw that the edge of the Negev, which is bordered with the Red Sea, is not in our hands. And Ben-Gurion gave the order to 2 military units to drive right away and to conquer the edge, to conquer Aqaba, to conquer Eilat. And then we had two brigades, which with tremendous speed darted toward Eilat and finally reached it before the ceasefire. And then, can I see the picture? The next picture, please. And then they improvised a flag, which is called the ink flag, because they took just a piece of cloth, of white cloth, and painted on it the flag of Israel. There is even a story that the Magen David on the flag was made out of the panties of one of the members of this group who decided to volunteer her lingerie to the state of Israel, and that's the Magen David in the middle of the flag, and they raised the flag in Eilat. Eilat became Jewish. Now, Ben-Gurion was very much excited by the Negev, and one day he was driving with a group of his assistants through the Negev, and he suddenly saw a few people, young people, working and building something in the middle of the Negev, the middle of the wilderness. So he got out of his car and he said, "What are you doing here?" And they said, "Well, we fought here during the Independence War, and we want to create a kibbutz." He said, "Of which party?" As you know, in Israel, everything is politicized. They said, "Of no party. We belong to different parties, but we want to create something which is just for everybody. Every member of any party can join." Well, he liked that. He wanted this kind of unity for Israel. And one day, a couple of years later, he called his secretary, Yitzhak Navon, the future president of Israel, and he gave him a piece of paper. And there was a kind of drawing there. It's written 9 meters, 6 meters, 3 meters. And he said to Yitzhak, this is it. So I said, "What is this?" He said, "This is the hut." He said, "What hut?" He said, "The hut which you're going to build for me in Sde Boker, in the kibbutz I mentioned before." And he said, "But why do you need the hut there?" He said, "Because I'm resigning. I'm going to live in the Negev." That was Ben-Gurion's idea, to draw behind him the youth of Israel to the Negev, to develop the Negev by giving them a personal example. He is going to become one of these pioneers and be with them in the Negev, and they will build the kibbutz, they will build the Israeli presence in the desert, and they'll make the desert flourish. And indeed, in December of 1953, to the tremendous surprise of everybody, Ben-Gurion resigned and left and went to live in the Negev. And he decided to turn the Negev into a kind of place where everything is going to be developed. Israel can become a leading power in the world by developing all kinds of inventions like solar energy, for instance. We can do it. We can do it in the Negev. And we can do many things in the Negev. Well, Ben-Gurion did not succeed very well this time to draw behind him the younger generation. But slowly, people started arriving. And he thought of Sde Boker as becoming one day the Israeli Oxford in the Negev. We shall have our own Oxford, our own center of education, of culture, of learning, of research. And people started coming. And then, for a strange reason, Beersheba became very important for the security of Israel, because Israel and France signed a secret agreement about the French people, the French government, building a nuclear reactor for Israel in the Negev. This reactor was supposed to be in Dimona. Dimona is about 60, 70 kilometers from Beersheba. It's about a 50-minute drive from Beersheba. Many French specialists and experts came to live in Beersheba and work in the reactor. That was a total secret. but they didn't have homes. So Israel built for them an entire neighborhood of houses and villas. And that became the French neighborhood of Beersheba. Another thing was very, very strange because nobody believed that Israel is able to build and to maintain a nuclear reactor. So all the Israeli scientists refused to go to Beersheba, refused to work in Dimona. What shall we do? Shimon Peres, who was then the Deputy Defense Minister of Israel, decided to recruit young engineers from the Technion in Hadeh, Israeli Technical Institute, Israeli MIT in Haifa, to bring them over and to instill in them this kind of ambition to build the nuclear reactor for Israel. And he succeeded to convince quite a group of engineers. But then they came to Paris and they said, our wives don't want to go there. That's in the wilderness. So he asked to meet with the wives. And these young ladies, young women, told him, we cannot go to live in Beersheba. He said, why? They said there are two reasons. One, there is not a beauty salon in all of Beersheba. It's, as they say, a kind of neglected town. He said, okay, I make the promise, you'll have the best beauty salon in Beersheba. And said the second reason is health. We are young mothers. We have babies, we have grandchildren. We need good medical care. He said, I can promise you that you'll have the best medical care. And 2 years later, my friends, Soroka was up and working. We had the plans to build a hospital in Beersheba, but they were in a drawer somewhere. Nobody touched them. But when Ben Gurion and Paris decided to build the nuclear center, there they built Dimona, they built Soroka. Soroka became the medical center, not only of the Negev, but in many ways also for larger parts of Israel. Now, I must tell you, when they built Soroka, they never expected, they never believed that this is going to become such a fantastic medical center from all kind of points of view. That's really a gem which serves Jew and Arab at the same time, Israelis and Bedouins. And when the year passed by, new kibbutzim and new moshavim were created in the Negev. New people started coming for their services in Soroka or to bear their children in Soroka. And today, we have everything in the Negev. You can't believe it. We have, first of all, this wonderful energy center where we use the solar energy and which we export to many poor countries throughout, and even rich countries like the US throughout the world. We have, and that's in Sde Boker, we have places where they make olive oil, places where they make wine. We have some of the best fish ponds in Israel in the Negev. And you have quite kind of special race of people who are going to the Negev, either joining a group or by themselves and building their own business, their own living, their own farms and ranches in the Negev. And we still see today, as the army is transferring all its units, centers to the Negev, very soon the general staff of the Israeli army is going to be in the Negev, and many government ministries, and they attract a lot of people. So indeed, this prophecy of Ben Gurion, that the Negev is going to become the future of Israel, is coming true. That was from the first moment when he saw this desert, when he saw these people, when he saw these fantastic possibilities of working in the Negev, of all these natural resources which were there. That, you know, under the Negev, we have a kind of saline sea under the Negev, under the desert, which we can use not for drinking water, but for fish raising and all kind of different purposes. So for us, the Negev is extremely important. And for the Negev to exist as it was, as it is today, we need Soroka. Here you see me, I was 26 years old when I worked with Ben Gurion, and always he spoke, when he was speaking about the Negev, his eyes will start shining and his hair, going up. And this prophet really believed that we have to go and create it. I remember a discussion between Ben Gurion and Moshe Dayan, the future defense minister of Israel, when Ben Gurion said, "You are here in the Negev, we are going to build cities, we are going to put cement, we're going to put concrete and to build big houses." And Dayan said, "Please, Ben Gurion, stop building cities everywhere. Leave us with the Negev the way it is today, with its natural beauty, a desert as it was before." But today we have both things in the Negev. Beersheba today is boasting a fantastic city, big city, with lots of people, with industries, and with the University of the Negev, the Ben Gurion University, where all the archives of Ben Gurion are kept. He is the symbol of this city, of this part of the country, as in many other things. And I was very proud of working with Ben Gurion. Well, that's enough about myself and Ben Gurion. I will be delighted now to introduce my good friend, Ambassador Haim Divon. Hello, Haim, you're there? Unmute yourself.
Thank you very much, Professor Bar-Zohar. We have here a few questions that came by. We'll wait until after Ambassador Haim Divon's presentation and address those questions to both of you. Toda rabba. Haim?
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. Wow, this is very special, and especially for me. I'll tell you more about it later on. I decided to give the talk a title, The Birth of a Hospital. And it all started actually way back in 1948 with the idea of having a medical center in the Negev started brewing. And if you will bring us to the first photo, yes, so this photograph is taking place in 1949, and the building behind those people is the building that was purchased by the Hadassah Women Organization in order to build a hospital that was so much needed in the Negev of that time. And a year later, the hospital was inaugurated. Can we see the next picture, please, Bazit? And this is actually the ceremony of opening the hospital, Yaski Hospital, in April 1950. So yes, I know that we are talking about Soroka, so why do I bring this hospital of Hadassah? Well, there is a very special connection, and I'll talk about it later. We'll go back to those photos, but let me first share with you my personal story. Well, I was a young paratrooper. Yes, this is me. You see, I didn't hardly change, as you can see. And well, we were practicing, our battalion was practicing in the Negev, and we were actually training how to overtake, through trenches, fortified targets, Yad Mevutzah, for those of us who understand. And when you go into the trenches, it's one after the other, it's in a column, and only the first guy is supposed to use his rifle, but the soldier behind me accidentally shot, misfired, and he hit me in the thigh, and the bullet came from the groin. So I'll have to be a little bit graphic, so you can imagine a bullet comes out from your groin, hitting the main vein and artery. If you don't stop the blood from gushing, this is it. This is the end of it, and I was very close to it. Lucky me, and there was a series of lucks. Lucky me, there was one of the soldiers, one of the paratroopers. He was also a military medic, and he just returned from the course qualifying him as a medic, and he was assigned to our platoon because every platoon was in a day, a distance away, and he actually had to use a rock. He told me later, I was almost out, that he has to use a rock in order to stop the blood from gushing. The usual tourniquet wasn't sufficient, and he did such a good job that they didn't ask for a helicopter to transport me to the next hospital as usually they do, and they waited for a half track, and it took time, and by the time that I reached the nearby hospital, it was Soroka. And this is how the story of Soroka kicks in. So Daniel Azriel, the medic, was able to do a fantastic job, and was able to stop it in such a way that people didn't think it's an urgent matter. When I reached the emergency room and they opened to see what's happened, I lost a critical amount of blood left, and in a way I was clinically dead. But the fantastic team of the medical center were able to stabilize my situation and rush me to the theater, to the operating theater, where Dr. Eger, the late Dr. Eger, that was actually the only trauma surgeon in the region, was able to undertake such a complicated operation of restructuring the both damaged vein and artery, grafting from one leg to another. The next day was supposed to be on a holiday. So if it would have been a day later, I don't know if I would have been talking to you today. And then they afterwards, after a while, they told me, well, we were able to save your life, but the leg probably will have to go. After a while, they said, well, we saved your leg, but you'll be limping the rest of your life. But then also afterwards, after rehabilitation, I'm almost back to normal. So without Daniel Azriel, the medic, without the amazing team of Soroka then, I wouldn't have been talking to you today. Let me also add an anecdote over here. Sometimes it's good to be, just an ordinary patient, because Professor Feuchtwanger, the late Professor Feuchtwanger, I remember, he was a friend of the family. He told me, if we would have known that you are the son of Professor Davis, which was one of his teachers in the Faculty of Medicine in Jerusalem, he would have waited and consult with him how to go about it, and that would have been a lost time. So luckily they didn't get my name right. They didn't get the name Davis, but another name, and therefore here I am. So a series of miracles, in a way, that took place in Soroka with the help of the medical guy from the military medic Daniel Azriel. And I'll go back to the photograph, to the second photograph. So why do I bring this photograph? And can we go to the next one, Pazit? The second photograph. Okay, so this is the ceremony of the opening of the Yaski Hospital, and the gentleman with the sunglasses is my late father. It was his vision in 1949 to build a medical center in the Negev. And remember, then I don't think there were even 2,000 inhabitants in Beersheba. He was then the director of the Hadassah Medical Center, Jerusalem. He succeeded Yaski because Yaski was murdered in the convoy of Mount Scopus. Actually, my father was supposed to be there, but they had changed last minute. And therefore, they named the hospital after Yaski. And my name, Haim, is actually named after Professor Haim Yaski, who lost his life under those tragic circumstances. So my father was the one who pushed the whole notion of the need to have, already back in 1949, 48 even, a center in the Negev, and he convinced the Hadassah Women Organization not only that this is a good thing to do in spite of the fact that they have to reorganize themselves in Jerusalem, but they gave $300,000 then, enormous sum of those days, in order to buy not only the building, but the equipment, paying salary, etc. The Yaski Hospital was operational for about almost 10 years, but then there was an agreement with Kupat Cholim Klalit, the General Services Fund, to build a new hospital, and the agreement with Hadassah was that the personnel and the equipment of the Hadassah Yaski hospital will be transferred to the new hospital of Kupat Cholim, of the General Services, which turned a couple of years later and became Soroka. So it wasn't easy for my father because not everyone thought that it's a good idea during those days. Imagine me going back to 1948 to have, and there were other priorities, but he was very determined, and he was able to convince Dr. Scheiber later on, Dr. Shiba, who was the chief medical officer of the IDF, which supported this notion, and they were able to have a hospital, and then later on to transfer the know-how, the people, the personnel, the equipment, the labs to Soroka. So this is a very special connection between the two organizations, between the Hadassah Medical Center, the Hadassah Women Association, and Soroka. And for that, my father was bestowed a very special honor. He became first of all, there was a street under his name, and he became, and also became an award of
beloved of Beersheba.
Yeah, and a distinguished citizen of Beersheba. So in a way, he then, when he had this vision of having a center, medical center in Beersheba, he didn't know that 20 years later, this center will save his son's life. And it saved many other lives, but this is kind of a closing the circle. And therefore, for me to be here and to be able to share the story, and Soroka gave me a gift of 51 years. I'm talking about 1969. 1969, when I was clinically dead, and see where I am now, and with a lovely family, and our daughter, young daughter Michal, who is also already connected somehow to Soroka. This is, for me, a very special occasion to be here with you and to share this very personal story. So again, a father with a vision, determination, 48, 49, 50, and then Soroka came later on out of that, and here we are with an amazing, amazing center in Beersheba, which besides saving my life, gave life to so many other people. So thank you very much, Soroka. I'm so grateful to be here to share the story.
Thank you very much. This was a very emotional, as we uncover more and more layers of the history and the family stories. Thank you both. And on that note, Ambassador Divon, there's a question here. I don't know, from an anonymous, maybe one of your friends or family members, saying, looking back all of these years as your parachuter days and ambassador days and the current, what do you think when you look back in your path of life? It must have been very difficult and traumatic to have a life-threatening wound. What do you think, and how do you feel when you look back in your life and to this day? It's a big question.
So, yeah. So when I look back, I just remember what gift of life I received. So even if you face hardships, hey, don't forget that I'm here to talk, to speak, to represent the state of Israel, to be active, to have a family. So I don't take it for granted. I was almost out there in 1969. And again, this gift, you can't ask for better gift that I can cherish. And therefore, it wasn't, for me, it wasn't traumatic, on the contrary. It was kind of yes, it wasn't easy during the days that I was treated, but reflecting on what happened and where am I now, and to look at family and work and the world, you put things in the right proportion.
Thank you. And this is a question for both of you. You described here impactful leaders that have been have great influence of you. If it's for Ambassador Divon, your father, you know, as a role model, and Professor Michael Bar-Zohar, Ben Gurion. What is the most significant trait or life's lesson that you got from your role models? Ambassador Divon, do you want to start?
Yeah, again, you know, you have to appreciate every day. You have to suddenly realize what does it mean to have a medical center, because it's life behind it, as Professor Bar-Zohar described before. It's, you know, when you have a good center, when you have a medical center, then it just draws other people around you. It helps developing a city. My dear sister Naomi and her husband, Professor David Frankel, who is a professor emeritus at the Ben Gurion University, they moved to Beersheba 40 years ago. And they wouldn't have moved to Beersheba if it wouldn't have become such a center. So yes, see just one good and robust medical center, what it can do to the entire community. It's amazing.
Thank you very much. And Professor Bar-Zohar?
When I think about Ben Gurion and what he used to say and to do, there was nothing impossible for him. That was the point. Everything, every goal he saw, he said, we can make it, we can do it. Don't forget, this man came to Palestine in 1906. In Palestine, there were about 65,000 Jews. And I asked Ben Gurion, what did you dream about when you arrived to Palestine? He said, I hoped that one day I'll see 500,000 Jews in Eretz Israel. 500,000. Today we are 9 million. And the same thing with the Negev. People would tell him, no, you can't develop it. There is nothing to develop. That's a desert. All the experts, they said, all the experts say that we can't develop the Negev. So Ben Gurion would say, fire the experts, bring new experts. He said, an expert is somebody who can describe you and analyze the past. There is no expert for the future. And if we have a strong will, we can do it. And that's fact. People laughed at him. I was myself a student in high school when he went to Sde Boker and tried to take the young generation after him. We did not believe in it. We just mocked and ridiculed the entire story. But finally, we found out that this guy, he was made of steel. He said, that's what you have to do. And he said to me, Bar-Zohar, when you get up in the morning, you must decide what's essential and what's redundant. And the redundant, don't do. Go for the essential. Go for the goal, for the major goal. That's what he did with the Negev. And Sde Boker, the kibbutz, and the high school, and the research center, and the energy center. All of that because you believe in people, you believe that they are able to do everything. And they had this very profound faith in the Jewish people. Very profound faith that the Jewish people can do everything. The same thing with the creation of the state of Israel. When everybody told him, it's a folly, it's crazy, you can't stand and fight 5 Arab armies. And he said, the best soldiers in the world are the Jewish soldiers. The best people in the world are the Jewish pioneers. We can make it. And with this force of character, he succeeded actually to instill in everybody around him the belief that we can make it. And with this spirit, which still remains the major Israeli spirit, we can see today in different fields. If you watch the high tech of Israel, which is today among the best in the world, it's because people have learned to believe in themselves and to believe that with their character, with their talents, with their devotion, we can make it.
Thank you very much. There are a few questions right now live. If you can, people write your questions on the Q&A, text it by text, typing it in the Q&A. So we have one question for Mr. Bar-Zohar. How involved was Ben-Gurion in the battlefield during the 48 war, and where was he stationed?
Look, Ben-Gurion admired very much Winston Churchill. He wanted to be the Churchill of Israel, and he was. Ben-Gurion was actually the commander-in-chief of the Israeli army during the Independence War. He was stationed at the general headquarters of the army, which was in Ramat Gan, close to Tel Aviv. He was always wearing the military uniform, and very often he came into terrible clashes with the heads of the army, because he had this prophetic vision about Israel, about what's important. And he also was a statesman. And they cared much more about tactical and strategic moves. For instance, he had a big fight with the chief of staff, acting chief of staff, Yigael Yadin, about Jerusalem. Ben-Gurion said, our major goal is to liberate and to annex to Israel the city of Jerusalem. And Yadin would say, well, I have more important goals: to fight the Egyptian army, which is approaching Tel Aviv, to fight the Syrians. He said, no. And he called the young general, Mordechai Maklev, and he told him, I want you to be commander of the Jerusalem front. He said, why? What's about Jerusalem? He said, listen, in the land of Israel, there are three major centers. Haifa is the industrial center of Israel. Tel Aviv is the administrative center of Israel. If Haifa or Tel Aviv fell in the war, in the hands of the Arabs, Israel would continue, it will survive. Jerusalem is the moral, spiritual, and religious center of the Jewish people throughout the world. If Jerusalem fell, there would be no state of Israel. So we must make every possible effort, including sending soldiers to fight to the last, in order to save Jerusalem. And that's what happened. And shortly after the Independence War, when it was over, he annexed officially the Jerusalem to the state of Israel. And in spite of the opposition of all the members of the United Nations, he transferred the capital of Israel to Jerusalem, where it is until this very day.
Okay, there is a question either of you can answer. Is it true that that Beersheba was not included as part of Israel in the UN partition plan?
I can answer it.
Go ahead.
Beersheba was supposed to be actually in the hands of the Palestinian state, and it was conquered by the Israeli army, and then the entire Negev. And when I became a member of parliament, I went to the archives and I found out that because of all the chaos of the creation of the state, they had forgotten to annex Beersheba to the state of Israel officially, because I would say that the system worked like that. The moment a part of Palestine was conquered or liberated, it was immediately annexed to Israel. They forgot about Beersheba. So I presented the bill in the Knesset, and we voted in the Knesset to annex finally Beersheba to the state of Israel. And we did.
What would the ambassador's father and David Ben-Gurion would say now about the situation of the Negev and the situation of the government of Israel as we approach yet another election? Not to turn this discussion political, but do you think they will be disappointed or excited with the direction that the Israel is going to nowadays?
In terms of the Negev?
The development, let's start with the development of the Negev.
Well, I think again, we talk about two people. Of course, you have Ben Gurion, my father, people with vision, people that not only had the vision, but had the capability of moving ahead and implementing a vision. So if my father wanted to see a big, robust medical center in the Negev, he sees it today, and I hope he is watching all of us. I'm not so sure there's a webinar up there, but he can watch. And he should be just satisfied that his dream and his vision is being implemented in such a way that it's just an amazing center, and it's much beyond just medical center. It's attracting so many different communities, and it is blending societies, whoever you are, whatever the background is, and it's fantastic.
It is the manifestation of peaceful coexistence.
Absolutely.
Yes, of the Negev.
I would
Professor
like to
Bar-Zohar.
yes, I would like to add, Ben Gurion would not have been satisfied. He told me once, you should never be satisfied. You should always strive to get more, to succeed more. Being satisfied is very bad for your health and for the nation. I believe that Ben Gurion would have been very, very proud of Israel today, because look, Israel is the great miracle of the 20th century. Look at the 20th century. Look at these huge empires which were created, like the Soviet Union that crumbled down, like the Nazi Germany crumbled down. The ideology, communism, fascism, Nazism, all of that crumbled down. The only achievement of the 20th century was the state of Israel. Nobody believed that we should survive. They said a few years. You can't stay there. And today, it's a country with a fantastic high scale technology, with a very strong army, one of the strongest in the world, with a very robust economy, 9 million people, and we are begging the Jews to come to make them even more. But one thing would have been for Ben Gurion, I would say, a disappointment. It's the gap which was created between rich and poor, between the more affluent parts of society and the people who did not reach the same level. That would be for him terrible, because he believed that the people of Israel must be, let's say, much more united and much more closely intertwined. Now, Ben Gurion had a dream. He wanted he wanted Israel to be what, as he called it, to be a light into the nations, to be a symbol of the success. And he always would say, the existence of Israel depends on two things: on her force, power, and of her righteousness. Now, the force we achieved, the righteousness, the light unto the nation, the moral status is still to come. And that's I would say, is his will and testament for the next generations, for the coming generations.
Thank you very much. There are two questions here about the water situation of the desert region, the Negev. Can you tell us a little bit more about the water and irrigation situation in the Negev, since it is a desert and water is the most important element for the Negev development?
There are two stages. There was the first stage when we didn't have enough water in the Negev, so we had to bring it either from the Yarkon River or from the Tiberias, the Lake of Tiberias, the Kinneret. And we did it in a tremendous national project it was. They brought the water to the Negev. The second point in this time was to create ways of watering fields and plants by bringing the water straight to the roots of the plant. This is an Israeli system which was extremely successful. Today you can see in many places that the irrigation system goes to every tree You have pipes which go to every tree, to every plant, and then we're able to save water. But then finally, we decided that the best way was not just by bringing a few drops of water, to bring a lot of water to Israel. And we built several huge desalinization projects along the beach, the Mediterranean coast. And today, by desalinizing the seawater, we have enough water for all what we need, not only for us, but we can also export it to our neighbors. So today, the water situation has been definitely solved.
If I may add, there's also another aspect to it, and this is treating wastewater. Israel is actually #1 in the world in using treated water for irrigation of agricultural fields. We are 80% of the water in Israel that is being used for agriculture coming from recycled water. The second country behind us is Spain, with only 16% of the water for irrigation coming from treatment plants. So this is another achievement. And again, as we all know, necessity is the mother of all invention. The minute you don't have water, you have to find ways. And if we remember our younger days where every drop count, I still remember every drop count, I still cannot bear the noise of a drop, of a dripping faucet. Today, we are in a different place. It's just unbelievable. So yes, I totally agree with Professor Bar-Zohar that we came a long way and we are able to share this know-how with so many other countries.
Okay, thank you very much. To that point of development of the Negev, there is a question. Do you think there should or there will be an airport soon in Beersheba area for the southern region?
Of course. We have already one in close to Eilat, a new airport to which scores of thousands of tourists are coming every year, straight to Eilat. Some of them even don't know that they're coming to Israel. And when they come, they come to the beaches, to the golden beaches of Eilat, to the Red Sea for a week or two. And then they ask, what else is to do here in this country? And they tell him, you can go to Jerusalem. He said, but Jerusalem is in the same country. They don't know. A second point is that now we are thinking about building another airport much more to the north, in the Negev as well. The only problem, and which is very important, is the ecology. We don't want a new airport to disrupt and to destroy this fantastic, I would say, surroundings of in the Negev. This primeval mountains and deserts and caves and the weather and animals. So we must be very careful because we are a lot of people. Israel is very small and we have to fight very hardly in order to preserve the nature, to preserve a kind of possibility for all these people to see their land, to see their countries. And I met yesterday a friend who told me, did you notice that many of the beautiful Israeli songs are not about, I love you, you love me. It's about places. It's about the Kinneret, the lake. It's about the Mount of Gilboa. It's about the Negev. It's about Ein Gedi. People love this country with a very profound love. I wouldn't have believed that this kind of attachment can happen in such a short period. People love the country. And then they said, everything you want to do, wait, would that in any way harm the ecology, harm the environment? So that's very important for us.
We spoke about diversity of the Negev, and we're gonna dedicate an entire session to that in the future, a Soroka Salon session. But to just point about the development in the Negev, is it, and Ben-Gurion's, what you said, Bar-Zohar, Ben-Gurion's pain that the big gaps between the people that have more and people that are poor. Do you think the current developments in the Negev is something that's good for that diversity and peaceful coexistence and closing the gap, the cultural, the economical, even the natural gaps that cultures that like to live in one with nature? Do you think it's a good thing for everyone in the Negev, all residents, or do you think there's a challenge there?
Ambassador Divon, do you want to?
Well, the challenge is not only there. I mean, the challenge that you mentioned before of the haves and have-not, it's an issue that I think if I don't know how one can address it, but this is certainly one of the challenges that Israel is facing these days. So people who, well, first of all, I see an interesting phenomena where more and more people are moving to the Negev because they see that the quality of life, that it's quiet, they don't want to see the bustling city, everything is cleaner, we talk about ecology, etc. And they know that there are good medical facilities, they know that there's a good university, so that adds to it. And I believe that eventually it will help. But as you mentioned before, some of the towns at the beginning in the Negev, I think felt a little bit left out, and this is a challenge. This is a challenge that we all have to face, government, municipalities, and it's a duty of each and every one of us. I think Soroka is doing its share by rendering services to everyone, but of course more has to be done in order not to face a social, I won't say unrest, but the social gap that is certainly unhelpful and should be somehow addressed.
Thank you.
There is one major problem, which is our relations with the Bedouins who live in the Negev. In the Negev, we have scores and scores of thousands of Bedouins who before were a nomadic tribe, and now they are settling down, not very successfully, I'm afraid. And lately there have been quite a lot of clashes between them and the Israeli army and the Israeli civilians. There is a lot of crime going on. So we have to find a solution and to help the Bedouins to find a way to live in a sedentary towns and villages in good relations with their neighbors, and to be able to use all this technology, all these achievements of the Israeli science and agriculture for their own success and prosperity. Today, that's one of the major problems we are facing in the Negev. It's the future of the Bedouin villages, towns, way of life in facing the ultra-modern way of the Israelis, the Jews, and we have to find a way to live side by side. There is a very encouraging phenomenon, though, that the young Bedouins, young Arabs, today want very strongly to integrate into Israeli society. We can see it in universities. We can meet them in hospitals, many doctors in Soroka, many nurses in Soroka, many lab workers in Soroka, and also many pharmacists and lawyers and high-tech workers. Lots of people, young people from Arab descent today are integrating in every level of the life in Israel, including the political level. So that may be the answer to our concerns in order to create really a country, a Jewish state in which everybody is equal.
Yeah, if I may add, it's doable. A lot depends on leadership of setting an example. Ben Gurion was, I mean, can you think today of any of the leaders going to, not a hut, even a villa in the Negev?
Right.
But as Professor Bar-Zohar said, it is a miracle, and it was a miracle. Just think that Beersheba in 1950 was less than 2,000 people, and see where Beersheba is today. So everything is possible, everything is doable. Leadership, commitment, people that care about what's happening, but what's happening recently that we are just busy between one election campaign and another. But let's look beyond and see what do we have as a country, what we have been achieving up to now. And again, Soroka is an example of vision that is being implemented, of a contribution much beyond the medical services, much beyond. And therefore, it's doable. And if it's not on the national level, so you take the leadership when it comes to the Negev, you can be so instrumental. And I'm sure you continue to do what you do, which is a great job.
Thank you very much. Before we turn into the last question, as we are coming to the end of this wonderful session, and we can continue learn and enjoy your enrichment and presence. There's a question here about a book, the book of Bar-Zohar. So Bar-Zohar had written 40 books and in 34 languages of translation. And as you know, we are a nonprofit of American Friends of Soroka Medical Center. So he extended Professor Bar-Zohar his generosity. If you donate $180 or more on soroka.org/donate, you will get a book, the latest version of the Ben-Gurion book in English with signed by the author himself. So I think it's double mitzvah, right? So the last question for you both is you have had and still will have a very successful career in foreign ministry, in teaching and writing and politics, history. What are you most proud of? It's really a hard question, but one of the things that resonate with you, that a memory or some feeling of achievement or fulfillment, sense of purpose that you can share with us as the last question for today.
I'm most proud of my next project. You always should be proud of what you're going to do. Lately, I created a new movement in Israel called Achdut, Unity, which tries to bring together all these different groups in Israel who today are, let's say, in the battlefield. Sephardis and Ashkenazis, secular and religious, Jews and Arabs. We must bring them together. So we created a movement which tries to bring together people of different political opinion, people of different descent. And I must tell you, with tremendous pride, is that these people, the movement has become a very important, I would say, beacon for the future of Israel, because we have people from all political parties, from the extreme right wing and extreme left wing. We have religious and secular. We have Arabs, we have Druze, and these people all are united by one will to build everything into this kind of closely tied friendship nation that is going to act in friendship and in understanding. That's what we're going to do, and that's my project, to develop this movement into a kind of national effort of unity for the future.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Divon.
Yeah, well, first of all, besides, of course, having a lovely, amazing family, which I think, I can now rest almost. I always felt so proud representing Israel in different, parts of the world. There were many challenges, but you have to stand tall and to the best of my ability. And the fact that I was able to talk about what we were discussing now, for example, and sharing the story and the miracle of Israel and to give people different angle, because people today, when they look at Israel, they think, that was it. Go tell them that Beersheba was 2,000 people only in 1948. I mean, they don't go that far. And also, I would say that what another very important milestone is, of course, Operation Solomon, which I was part of, and that was amazing. So that's of course a separate session, because it was just unbelievable. But to see after almost a year of working day and night, and to see suddenly 15,000 people going to Israel in 15 hours. I mean, this is just, we talk about miracles. If that is not a miracle, I don't know what miracle. I mean, go try and gather 15,000 people any place in there when there's a curfew, when the people, there's people are shooting around you, and gather them into the embassy compound quietly. There's no WhatsApp, there's no communication. How do you bring them at night when there's curfew? So just think of that, and then all went safely to Israel. So there are so many milestones, and just to be able to represent Israel, it was, I would say, the biggest award that I can think of, and what a fulfillment and what a satisfaction. And again, I also continued doing it as head of Mashal, to share our experience with other countries. So because we are living laboratory, come learn from our achievements and our mistakes, and whatever you think is suitable to you, just we'll be more than happy to assist. And again, that was Ben Gurion, who actually was orchestrating the whole notion of, a light unto the nation, that we should help, we should share, we should exchange know-how, way back in the early 50s. And I'm so proud that I was able to be part of this amazing endeavor, that Israel, small Israel, is helping others, and no strings attached. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you both. I thank all the participants and the American Friends of Soroka Medical Center, the board, the staff, the team, and all of you supporters. So see you at the next session on April 7th about innovation and health tech in the Negev. Toda rabba.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Thanks.
Thank you.